Good morning, everyone. Uh, Hopefully you all found the room change correctly. It's new digs for us over here today. Before we get started, I want to take a minute and thank Kevin and Edie for the great work that they do, because I guess this is a day we need to recognize our age. And I want to make sure I do that. So thank you. Thank you both. And Daly, too. Thank you for the work you do. We appreciate it. All right, we'll open the hearing on House Bill 1456, and I will recognize Representative Walsh to introduce the bill. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Tom Welsh. I'm a representative from Merrimack 10, which is the towns of Hooksett and Dunbarton. And I'm here this morning to introduce House Bill 1456, which is relative to the appointment of the members of the Board of Land and Tax Appeals and the Housing Appeals Board. I'm hoping this is one of your easier ones of the day. It came to my attention last year that there were sometimes issues with the removal process of land and tax. And when I started looking into it, I noticed that when the Housing Appeals Board was created, they basically took the language from the appointment and removal of land and tax. But then I was also surprised to see that the appointments were made by the Supreme Court. And so I questioned it. And in looking for a solution, I said, well, seeing as how these are quasi-judicial boards, why wouldn't the appointment and removal process be done the same way the judges are and put it in the hands of governor and council? Basically, that's all this does. The removal and the appointment and removal are actually in four different sections. 71B2, 4.1 is the removal, and 4.44 is the appointments hearing for the land and tax. And 679.2 is for the appointment of land and tax. So instead of confusing it, that's all this bill does is put it in the hands of the governor and council as opposed to the Supreme Court. Fortunately for me, we have a former member of the Supreme Court who can probably get into the details of how it got here and maybe some of the problems that occurred for this to even get to this point. I guess, and one last thing too, I guess there is an amendment, I believe you did receive it, that suggests maybe raising the term of the land and tax from 3 years to 5, which would match the Housing Appeals Board, which I have no objection to. And there is another, at the end of that amendment, if you do have a copy of it, remove some of the language on the reasons why. I'll leave that up to you. I know there's somebody from Land and Tax here that's got the explanation for that as well. But again, I think it's an easy fix. It should clean things up, and that's pretty much all I have.
All right, thank you, Representative. I do notice there's a couple changes in the proposed language here, but I'll save those questions for them.
Fantastic.
Any questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Lynn. Good morning. Welcome to Senate ED&A in the House, Jan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm Representative Bob Lynn from Rockingham 17, represent the town of Wyndham, and I'm here in support of this bill, along with the proposed amendment. I think for a long time, we have someone here from the Supreme Court who I think will kind of confirm this, but I think for a long time, it was my view, and I think the view of, I didn't sort of, before coming here today, I didn't poll all the current members of the Supreme Court on this, but I think generally when I was there, the view was that it was not an appropriate, although the legislature had assigned the appointment of BTLA members to the Supreme Court, it wasn't, we all kind of felt uncomfortable about that because it is, as Representative Walsh mentioned, it is sort of a quasi-judicial position. And, speaking personally, I just don't think that judges should be appointing other judges. That's really something that is for the governor and council. And so that's what this does. The amendment that was suggested by the chair of the BTLA suggests, and I think I agree with this, that they're really to increase the length of the term from 3 years to 5 years, which is consistent with what the Housing Appeals Board is. You may know that there was a bill in the House this year that proposed consolidating the Board of Tax and Land Appeals and the Housing Appeals Board, and candidly, initially, I had some thought that might make some sense, but after we heard the evidence on it, we kind of came to the conclusion that it really would. The things they do are different enough, and the Housing Appeals Board is new enough that now wouldn't be the time to make that kind of consolidation. But I think that, to the extent that you can make their their terms, for example, consistent 5-year terms, that kind of thing, it does seem to me that makes sense. And the removal process, the appointment, hearing, removal process, et cetera, it seems to me should be the same. So for those reasons, I support the bill and I support the amendment. And I'm happy to answer any questions that people may have.
Thank you, Representative. Questions from the committee? All right, seeing none. We
Great,
appreciate
thank
coming in.
you.
Michelle LeBron. Good morning. Yes, please, turn the mic
Okay.
on.
My name is Michelle LeBrun. I'm the Chair of the Board of Tax and Land Appeals. The board is in support of the bill as drafted with the suggested proposed amendment. And I think both the representatives have spoken well as to why we are suggesting these changes. When the board was formed, the terms were 5-year terms, and they were changed about 10 or 12 years ago legislatively in a trailer bill. It was just automatically, let's change that, the board members from 4 to 3 and the terms from 5 to 3. So it's been that way all along, and I agree, going to the court every 3 years to get reappointed, I think they get to the point where they say, you again? And they've had their fill this past year because there were 2 vacancies in the Housing Appeals Board and a vacancy in the Board of Tax and Land Appeals. So, it's a lot on the court to vet people, and it took quite a bit of time from the time our prior board member resigned and we were able to get a new board member because of the court's process. So we are in favor of changing that. I think you were going to ask the last sentence why we recommended changing the language. The language in the statute, the 71B statute, is basically the same as the first sentence of 4.1, which, except that 4.1 substitutes or includes misfeasance as well as malfeasance. And it's more in line with all other unclassified employees. Okay. And it would be, any removal process would be handled by the governor and council rather than the court. And the way the law was written, it was questioned whether or not it would be the court or the governor who would handle it. So it got a little bit confusing at one point. So we're just trying to clear that up.
All right, so it looks like you're removing some language from line 8 that's dealing with how a member may be removed, and you're addressing that down in line, well, essentially lines 19 to 22.
Correct.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I had it clear. All right, thank you. Did you have further testimony there?
No,
All
I'll
right.
answer any questions that anyone
All
may
right.
have.
Questions from the committee? We answered it? All right. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Arnie Krien. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Arnie Krien. I'm the General Counsel for the New Hampshire Judicial Branch, and so I don't often have the chance to see you all in executive departments and agencies, although perhaps I should have come by on Representative Lynn's very excellent HB 1274, which makes a number of appreciated technical corrections for the Judicial Council and the Judicial Branch. I am coming to let you know that the Supreme Court does not jealously guard its prerogative to make these appointments and removals. As a quasi-judicial executive board, the Supreme Court does not supervise the BTLA or the HAB. So that makes it very awkward to make a removal determination because you have no familiarity whatsoever with how a person is conducting their job and you have no other disciplinary options available either. So it's created a little confusion at times about whether we should be more involved, whether we should be training them, and this would remove that ambiguity and make it very clear it is a quasi-judicial executive board, which is fully handled and competently handled by the governor and council. So I've come to let you know if anyone is concerned that this 50-year tradition of the Supreme Court making these appointments and removals is a dear tradition, that it's okay if you think maybe it'd be better done by governor and council.
All right, thank you. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, we thank you. Representative McGuire, you signed in. Do you have anything you'd like to add, or you're good? Okay. Anybody else that would like to testify on House Bill 1456? All right, seeing none, we will close the hearing. We got about 2 minutes before we can start the next. For the benefit of the committee, I have an amendment being drafted for this. The one we just heard. 1456. Yes. Well, this one, just putting it in an amendment form. Yes. Yeah, if you notice, there's no sponsor on this. It's just proposed language. Yeah, I have an actual amendment being drafted.
Okay. You don't want to just do this as a minute amendment? It's done.
We could, I guess.
Yeah, you already did.
Are you comfortable with that?
I am, yeah.
All right, I'll take a motion.
Well, do we have to do
Let's go. Do you want to do it right now?
Make a motion, we go into executive committee?
Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Is there a motion on 1456?
I second that.
Moved and seconded, and we want to do a committee amendment with the proposed language. Kevin, you're all set with the language that was proposed? Okay, as a committee amendment? All right. Any discussion on the committee amendment? All right. All in favor of the committee amendment on 1456? Aye.
Aye.
Senator Altshuler moves ought to pass as amended, seconded by Senator Gendro. And further discussion?
Flag it in case we get.
We can always reconsider if we choose to.
Consider it for
Just,
that purpose
yep.
later. Nope, nope, not it. We're just-
all in favor of 1456 as amended?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Senator Altshuler, would you like to take this one out?
Sure.
All right, Senator Altshuler will take it out. Motion to come out of exec?
So, second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we are right on time. We'll open the hearing on House Bill 1323. And is Representative Hobson here? There she is. Yes. Okay. Okay. All right, so Representative Hobson is not introducing it, but we have another representative.
Yes, I'm Representative Katie Petterell. Just let me pull up my.
Sure, take your time. When you're ready, go ahead. My goal today is to keep us on time. I don't know if I can do it, but I'm going to try.
I always try not to speak too long because I know all of our time is valuable. So, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the rest of the committee for being here. For the record, I am Katie Peternell. I represent Carroll District 6, Wolfboro, and Tuftonboro in the beautiful Lakes region, and I serve on the House Education Committee. I'm here to present House Bill 1323. The intent of this bill was simply to provide more physical copies of the New Hampshire Constitution to the residents of the state. And a constituent had come to the sponsors of the bill and requested that more copies of the Constitution be made available. And originally, we were thinking of the booklet that's currently distributed by the Secretary of State's office, which are available for fourth graders and high school students. And sometimes more copies are needed, and staff has to go into the archives to get older versions. But this amended version was passed by the House to print a smaller copy, similar to pocket copies of the United States Constitution that are already available. Though, and interestingly, in researching RSAs for other legislation pertaining to registering high school students to vote, we came across two RSAs from 1937, 18922 and 18923, which require the Secretary of State to furnish to the State Board of Education such number of copies of the state constitution as may be necessary, and for the State Board of Education to distribute copies of the state constitution and election laws to all teachers of history and civics and U.S. history. So this is certainly no longer being done, but we did receive word from the Department of Education that they would try to make sure that that occurs again. So these copies, the New Hampshire Constitution is available on the nh.gov website, but having a hard copy available for distribution and purchase would be another way to encourage people to be involved in their state government. These copies of the Constitution would certainly be helpful for our students and adult constituents to have on hand and available for purchase. And thank you, and I'll try to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions from the committee? Senator Olcho?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. Forgive me for not knowing this because I got them locally, but do we give them at the Secretary of State's office or do we sell them at the visitor center? I don't know, other than getting it in, my kids all got them in classrooms and.
They're distributed through the Secretary of State's office. They are not available for purchase in the visitor center. But these we would
Okay.
like to be able to make available for purchase in larger. If somebody wanted 100 copies, they would have to purchase them.
Got it. Okay.
Further questions? All right, seeing none. Thank you for your testimony. Rep Dry, did she want to testify? Yeah. Okay, come on up.
Good morning. I
Good
am
morning.
Representative Margaret Dry. I serve Sullivan District 7, Plainfield, Cornish, Newport Unity, and Charlestown. And I'm also on the Education Committee. I'm a co-sponsor of this bill, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about how it was amended. It was originally just an appropriation, and now it's amended and just gives basically the Secretary of State some leeway in how to do things and to print copies. However, I just have to say that in looking at the amendment, it says to amend RSA 5 by adding after section 5B, the following new 5C section. Well, if you go to 5, 5A is repealed, there is no 5B, and so I'm not sure where 5C would go and why that's there. So that may have been a typo, that may have been an oversight. It's just a minor addition. I just want to say that the effective date, July 2025, is different from the original date that we had, but there is method to the madness because if we do a constitutional question on the ballot this fall, we might then have to change our constitution, and why would we print a lot of constitutions that would be immediately outdated? So we agree with that date, and I just ask you to look into that problem with the statute.
Thank
And I'm
you.
happy to answer any other questions.
Questions from the committee?
Okay.
Seeing
Thank you
none,
very much.
Thank you. Deputy Secretary Hennessy from the Secretary of State's office. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. My name is Erin Hennessy. I am the Deputy Secretary of State. Good to see all of you. I have with me here today an example of what the pocket constitution might look like if this bill were to pass and require us to hand them out. I do want to say that the new date, not only does it allow for possible questions that voters may, constitutional changes that voters may do in the fall, get into this pocket constitution, it also allows us to put into our budget the money for printing of these constitutions. I know you're not the the finance committee, but the appropriation for this was taken out by the House. So we anticipate putting this into our budget request for 2025-26, and the timing of the bill would allow us to make that a request. Good morning, Senator. The cost is probably about $1 each. The flexibility in the wording of this bill allows us to hand out, if you come into our office, if you have an interest in finding out about New Hampshire Constitution, we can give them out to you. But if you would like to purchase a copy for your entire town, we would be able to, this allows us to charge you for those copies.
Awesome.
I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Are you familiar with the issue that the representative raised about the numbering here?
Thank you. They just brought that up to me outside, and I'm not sure. There may be something that was passed in the interim that hasn't made it to the website yet. So I think it might be an OLS question to see if there is a new 5B.
All right. Thank you. Questions from the committee? Seeing none?
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else that would like to testify on House Bill 1323? All right, seeing none, we will close the hearing. I think my suggestion would be we hold off on execing this one so that I can take a look at this and see if there is a numbering issue that needs to be corrected. Good morning, Senator. Do we know if Senator Carson is coming? I know she called me last night and she said she had some conflicts on time. Yes. So likely we're not going to see her? Okay.
I just ran into her in the lobby. She said that you knew she was camped out with
Yeah, I knew she had some conflicts. She didn't know how, exactly what her time availability was going to be. We have 5 or so minutes if we're going to exec bills or we're going to do it 4.
Yeah, we're gonna do it before, so.
So what I would say is if we have some bills that you feel we're all in agreement on, I'm happy to take those up right now.
Okay, we go into exec?
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Let me just get organized here real quick. You had an amendment on, correct?
Yes, I believe that
start.
was the known stakeholders language.
Take a look at that one and. Did Senator Carson have some concern with this? I almost think I remember this.
She just sort of said, I would like to take a look at it and think it through. She did not express a specific concern, but I don't know if she's gotten a chance to consider it further or not.
Did you say you have an amendment?
Yeah.
Oh, you have an amendment.
No, Senator Perkins spoke.
Senator Perkins Quogue has an amendment.
How about if we wait and see if we can do this? Just, I want to make sure if she had a concern that we give her the opportunity to raise it. So
Sure.
let's do that. Let's go to 518.
Okay?
I have an amendment, I believe.
Yes, I think you do.
Just remember what it is.
So I believe that
All
it restored inspections to once a year.
Yes, and I'm just reading, I had notes from Mr. Osterhout that was asking for these changes. So the amendment that is 1601S.
I just have a copy of what Doug sent. Yeah, I don't have a formal amendment.
I don't have anything for 518.
I have the, Kevin, did this get sent to you? I am not sure. We've been scrambling pretty fast in the office.
No.
Okay. I have one copy that has the changes that Mr. Osterhout asked for.
Okay.
I'm happy to give you a quick second to read it. I know there's a lot to it. I don't believe I have more copies here. I know we're all working at lightning speed here lately.
I know.
Do you have another copy?
Unfortunately, I guess I only have that one.
Did you email it? Is it in my email?
I'm not sure that I got emailed. It may have just
No
gotten
worries.
printed and put in my folder. Yes. Okay. I do have an OLS drafted copy.
1601. Do you want to just copy this, Kevin,
Yeah.
in our office? Yeah.
I'll give you that.
Okay.
I know you had a quick minute to peruse it. Did you have any concerns?
I didn't have any further comments in that moment. I
All
did
right.
not. I know that at the hearing, the big issue was that we were concerned to not have any inspections and to just have them tied to renewal every 2 years because he said inspections are ineffective. And then OPLC said notice 541.
I essentially drafted the amendment off from the language that OPLC provided.
Yep. And I just had this note about 541, 31. Let me just look up what that section. Oh. And you. Oh. 541, 31.
Senator Waters, are you going to be able to stay to testify, or do you need to go? You- Okay. I think in the interest of time, I'm going to ask that we put off our exec session so we can start our next hearing. And
Sure.
when we get the amendment, we can take this up in between.
Sure.
Do I have a motion to come out of exec?
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are out of exec and we can start right now. I'm going to open the hearing on House Bill 1474, and I will recognize Representative Schmidt. Introduce the bill. Good morning. Welcome to EDNA.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be before you. It's been a while since I've been down here in Senate EDNA, but I always like being here because you got folks know the same territory that we deal with in House EDNA. So in any case, I'm pleased to be before you to introduce House Bill 1474 relative to the Commission on Native American Affairs. And I want to be upfront right off the bat and say that I do not profess any particular expertise in the area of Indigenous affairs, although I've been getting a lot of schooling in the matters relevant for the last couple of years. And I bring this bill not of my own devising, but rather because the Native American Affairs Commission in New Hampshire has been handicapped for quite some time by quorum issues, and that is the primary subject of this bill. Although it deals with a couple of other things that it picked up in the course of being developed, and there are several members or former members of the commission who are here this morning that can give you the expert testimony that you deserve. But I will just speak to the quorum issue, and you see on lines 17 and 18 that it's being changed, that the current situation is being changed from 9 members to 50% of the appointed members plus 1. So you have the typical type of quorum requirement. But one of the problems with the current commission is that they are 3 or 4 slots are unfilled at the moment, and no one has been appointed to fill those slots for some time, and therefore they are very often without a quorum. And as you all know, without a quorum, you can't act. So that is the main purpose of this bill. And the other things, as I understand it, are changes that have been made where the current statute is out of sync with federal law. But I don't want to get too deeply into that since I have that's not my doing. If there are other questions, I'd be happy to try to entertain them at this time.
Thank you for your testimony. It looks like Senator Waters has given us some amended language. Are you familiar with it?
He just laid it on me about 2 minutes before I sat down in this chair. As I understand it, it's to correct a deletion in my bill that is not, in fact, well-founded, and I'll let Senator Waters speak to that since he clearly knows what he's talking about. So
Okay.
That's all I can say about that.
Thank you. Questions from the committee?
Thank you,
Seeing
Chair.
none?
Thank you so much.
Senator
My-
Waters? Good morning and welcome to EDNA.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Senator David Waters, District 4, and I didn't sign in and support or oppose because I agree with what the sponsor said, that we need to have some changes, the quorum issues in particular. So good bill, and I just am before you because I thought there was one change that the bill made, which, given the history I had on creating the commission, I thought perhaps we should consider keeping in as part of the duties. I believe I'm the last person still in the legislature who was a co-sponsor of the original commission bill, and it's just a tribute to the activism and leadership of Native people in this state that that bill was able to pass and brought forward. And the commission has really done very good work. It does need some changes to it, I think, as outlined in the bill and the quorum issue in particular. And as you know, Mr. Chairman, I also supported the study bill because I thought, 10 years on, it's not a bad idea to look back and see where we are. But in a particular issue I wanted to point out here is on page 2 of the bill, starting on line 13, section 3. And when we crafted the bill, at that point in time, it seemed very important to address the crafts issue. And that's why that language was included there. And that was a very strong desire on the part of the bill, and in particular reflected at the time issues that were raised across the country about the proliferation of non-native crafts produced overseas and manufactured and labeled as native crafts, and also the recognition that there's such an extraordinary craft tradition, art tradition within indigenous groups in New Hampshire, and that this was a way to affirm that the kinds of labeling, recognition, and protection of those items. So that's why we had it in the bill originally, and my amendment simply restores that. I believe there was some suggestion in the House that the Attorney General had some concerns about this section, but the Attorney General's office and all the attorneys have been surveyed, and they have no recollection of ever being contacted by anybody about problems regarding this, nor do they offer any opinions on it. So I think just the safe course here is to leave this in for now, and I think it was important at the time, and I think it's still an important factor as well. So that's really all I have to say, Mr. Chairman, and I think you will hear good arguments about many parts of the bill as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Questions from the committee? All right.
Thank
seeing
you
none,
very much.
Thanks for your time.
Sorry I have to dash off.
That's okay. Sherry? Sorry, can't quite read the last name.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning. Welcome to EDNA.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my name, for the record, my name is Sherry Gould, and I'm representative for Merrimack District 8 for the towns of Henniker, Bradford, and Warner. I come before you today as one of the sponsors, co-sponsors of the bill, to talk about some concerns that came up in the House committee. I serve on the EDNA committee in the House. And so, as Senator Waters outlined, removing the Indian Arts and Crafts Act from the bill is an area that is of concern for Native Americans in New Hampshire who are enrolled in the Abenaki tribes. There are 4 recognized Abenaki tribes that many of us in New Hampshire have enrolled in, and they were originally recognized by the state of Vermont in order to protect the sale of Indian arts and crafts. And in fact, many of us in New Hampshire, because we had no path in New Hampshire to enroll in a recognized tribe, we had no option but to enroll in a Vermont recognized tribe because it would be illegal for us to sell our crafts if we. So I got a handout for you that I think will help with what I'm trying to say here. And if this can get passed around. There's 5 copies, so I think is enough for everybody. So the Indian Arts and Crafts Act, as you'll see in the bottom of the slide of the handout, covers, it lays out the definition of who is legally Native American to be covered under this act. And so it's enrolled members of federally recognized tribes is the first bullet in the bottom part of the slide. The second bullet is enrolled members of an officially state recognized tribe. So what happened was, as soon as Vermont recognized the 4 tribes, those of us in New Hampshire who were selling our Abenaki crafts, and I'm an Abenaki basket maker, as is my husband, we would have been breaking the law, and the federal law. And so we had to enroll in a tribe to avoid that, or not sell our craft, which of course would be devastating to families like mine whose families have been Abenaki basket makers forever. So as Senator Waters said, it's important that it be in the act. And then the other piece of it is Vermont made some mistakes when they were doing the recognition, where initially they recognized the Abenaki in a generic kind of manner without specificity. So that's where you'll see in that same bullet, enrolled member of an officially state recognized tribe. There's certain provisions under the Indian Arts and Crafts Act that states have to go through when they do recognition. And though New Hampshire is not looking at recognition at this time, at any point in the future, if they do, if we do, the state does, then it will be important that that information be in there. As Senator Waters pointed out, those of us who worked that bill through in 2010, House Bill 1610, there aren't many of us left, and we may not always be here. So it's important for the future people who may come to this. And there was no study committee, there's no report on file about why that got put in here. So anyway, I think that's really important. And I did speak with the Deputy Attorney General, James Buffetti, last night at 3:15 to inquire about the matter that was brought up regarding some of the citations to the Indian Arts and Crafts Act being out of sync. And I also went through the laws, the citations, and they all seem to be exactly as they were in 2010. I do have printouts. I didn't make copies for everybody, but I have one copy of 2 of them I can leave, and a copy of the Indian Arts and Crafts Act I can leave for the committee. But I asked him if he was aware of any concerns from the Attorney General's office about this in particular, or in general about statutes, New Hampshire statutes having citations to federal laws, in terms of concerns that as federal law changes, the citations may become outdated. And he said he couldn't imagine that anyone out of his office would opine on the matter. But he said he would go do a survey of the all the attorneys present in the office and get back to me. Unfortunately, I had to go milk the cow. So when he called back and my husband said she had to step out for a minute, she had to milk the cow, he said, that is a first. So we had a good laugh about that. But at any rate, he did report back that he had spoken to every attorney in the office, and none of them were aware of this. And not only were they not individually aware, but that the Attorney General's office has a weekly legislative action committee that meets and goes over all the bills and reviews all the bills, and this bill had never come up on his purview. So we felt pretty confident that that there was not an opinion that was opposed to this staying in the act. I think that's about. There were other areas in there, as Senator Waters has said. I think that the quorum is the most important issue for the commission. We know there are applicants waiting for the governor to appoint, and I know we hear in the House side, and or am I supposed to say on the other side of the wall side, that appointments to the to any of the commissions and boards, to all the commissions and boards, are very slow in happening because of the great volume of them. And so we have, I know there are many applicants waiting to be appointed, but the quorum fix that's proposed here would fix that. So I didn't sign in opposed or supporting, because I certainly support the commission being able to function. That was Chairman Maguire's takeaway from our committee hearing, was that this bill would, the fix on the quorum would allow the commission to survive. And as you know, we had all supported the study committee, and we had hoped that that could then look at those broader issues and come up with some solutions for those.
All right, thank you, Representative. Do we have questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, thanks for your testimony. Ann Jennison? Good morning.
Morning. Take just a minute to get this out.
Sure, take your
I
time.
have a statement that I'm going to rely on reading, but I did print copies. Should you,
Yeah, give them right to Edie here.
I don't know if you could reach it. Are you
feel-
able to hear me all right?
Yeah, feel free to
Okay.
just give us the highlights if you don't want to read the whole statement, since we
Yeah,
have a written
so-
copy.
That's okay. It's not that long. So I'll start with, for the record, my name's Ann Jennison. I'm a resident of Lee and the current chair of the New Hampshire Commission on Native American Affairs. Thank you for hearing us this morning. So just a little bit of background material. I want to just start my comments by providing a bit of context as you're considering the bill. 1474 was originally drafted at the request of the New Hampshire Commission of Native American Affairs by Denise Pulio, who was at that time the vice chair of the commission. Then the commission consulted about the draft, helped to edit it, and unanimously approved the final text. We're grateful to Representative Schmidt for agreeing to sponsor this bill. The commission sees Representative Schmidt as a staunch Indigenous ally who recognizes the ability of Indigenous peoples to define for themselves how best to meet their unique needs and concerns. The bill proposes amendments to the original New Hampshire law that created the commission 14 years ago, fine-tunes the commission's functions and responsibilities, proposes amendments that remove references to responsibilities that actually fall under the purview of federal law and agencies, while clarifying the ways in which New Hampshire Commission on Native American Affairs can best serve all of the Indigenous residents of New Hampshire. so the Abenaki peoples, but as well as all those peoples who are descended from or enrolled members of other tribes, but who are residents of New Hampshire. So we don't represent only the Abenaki people, but all of the indigenous residents of New Hampshire, which I think is an important point because there are many. The individual members at large who serve on the commission have been appointed by the governor not only because of their indigenous heritage, but because of their specialized cultural and historical knowledge, as well as their experience regarding contemporary indigenous issues. Their collective knowledge and experience was brought to bear in consulting about the content of 1474, redefining the functions and clarifying the responsibilities of the commission. As has been mentioned already this morning, one of the major issues that's plagued the functioning of the commission for years now has been the requirement to have at least 9 members physically present at a meeting in order to convene and address the agenda. So time and again, we've had to cancel or postpone meetings because it was so challenging to achieve that high number, especially with people needing, to fulfill their professional or family obligations or travel from far-flung distances in the state. So that's been a real challenge, and it seriously hampered the ability of the commission to function. As right now, as a matter, we have not been able to convene since November. We had finally gotten to the point where we were going to convene, and ironically, we had decided that April 4th we had a quorum, and then we got hit with a major storm, and so we're going to go online. This constitutes an emergency, and then there were so many power outages that not all the members of the commission could get online to do it as a Zoom meeting. It's just frustrating beyond belief. So hopefully, we believe that the new quorum proposal would address that. So in closing, the New Hampshire Commission on Native American Affairs wants to really, once again, acknowledge Representative Schmidt, and as well as all the co-sponsors of the bill. Thank them for their support. We deeply appreciate it. We appreciate your hearing us this morning. And I would like to just say that I'm still thinking about what has been said this morning about proposing an amendment because it's the first I've heard of it. The commission was not consulted with at all about this proposed amendment, and so it's confusing to me why this issue of the federal Indian Arts Act. I'm just speaking as an individual now. I can't speak on behalf of the commission because we haven't had a chance to consult about it. But it's already a federal law. And so that means that it's not something, to the best of my knowledge, that state law could override. And it addresses the needs. We still, the commission would defer to whatever the federal law is. We're careful to assist people to meet whatever requirements are if they come to us to meet federal laws, and then to understand that actually our function in the state is to work with individuals who come to us with issues, work with various organizations who come to us, to work with state agencies who come to us. And if the issue is a federal issue, we explore the federal laws with people as they come. And if it's a state issue, then we are fairly unfettered in terms of, the kinds of advice and assistance we can provide. So I just am really not clear why it seems to me it would be redundant to address the Indian Arts Act in this bill. But I'll let other people speak about it as well. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to address them.
Well, thank you, Ann, for your testimony. Thanks for coming in. Questions from the committee? All right, seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And our final speaker, Denise and Paul, did you both want to speak? Okay.
Kwai Needlebach and Delawasin Denise Pulio, Sagama Squaw, Wadelawasin Paul Pulio, Sagamo, Cossack Band of the Pennacook Abenaki People, Kiona Ayan Odana Kunipi. Hello, friends. My name is Denise Pulio. I'm the head female speaker, and this is Paul Pulio, head male speaker in chief of the Kawasaki Band of the Pennacook Abenaki people. We come to you today from our ancient Pennacook village called Odinakuanipi, which translates to the village of the narrowing of waters, now known as Alton, New Hampshire. So we've come today to discuss HB 1474. As Ann has previously stated, I was the sculptor of that bill. I was the individual that met with the individual departments throughout the state and had these conversations with the corresponding emails to certify these conversations. This bill was discussed with the Department of Justice. However, it was not a bill at that time. It was a conversation, so it was not needed to go on any of the dockets. When you can go back, if I didn't realize this was going to be a topic of conversation, or else I would have brought the emails with me, but you'll see my very poignant questions to the DOJ requesting wording about specifics within the bill. And that is actually section F here on the bill. And I'll read you what that section states. So the part that I actually consulted about is the commission at the time was having an issue where people from tribal organizations were trying to stack the commission for their own benefit. And so we were trying to prevent that from happening because this is a state commission and should be available to all people, all residents of the state. And so this is the terminology that we came up with. To provide equity, diversity, and inclusion, a limit of one representative from a single Indigenous group may serve at one time. For the purposes of this section, Indigenous group means and includes any Indigenous tribe, band, society, organization, family, or community. Indigenous group shall not include social or political groups open to members of diverse Indigenous backgrounds, organized for the purpose of promoting Indigenous interests. So that was the section that was discussed with the Attorney General's office. So I know you weren't given copies of the bill, the entire bill with the changes included. So I'll pass you a copy of that so you can actually track what has happened within the bill. And I will acknowledge I did make a mistake on the back of this, and I will address that when I get there. So at the very beginning, the Department of Historical Resources requested that we put on a member from the University of New Hampshire based on the new Indigenous Studies minor that was established at the school in 2019. We addressed the issue in section F. The quorum is addressed in section 4, where 50% of appointed members plus one additional member. Section 5, we maintained, we went from a chairman to a chairperson, and we added vice chairperson. We removed secretary and treasurer. Those duties are currently handled by the state, and we don't see any reason why to change that since the minutes and everything else need to be posted on the state website. When you flip over to the other side, section B, develop recommendations to assist state agencies with the preservation and protection of Native American artifacts and burial grounds. The commission is there to comment and assist, but they are not there to actually do the work. The federal law actually dictates that that's done by organizations through the BIA and the BLM. So that's why the Native Americans and Graves Repatriation Act was deleted from that line. We deleted the word cultural to recognize historic and contemporary contributions. We do so much more than just cultural issues within the state, and so we wanted to acknowledge that. C was just a header for the next section, so we just removed that. 1, securing social services, education, employment opportunities, healthcare, housing, cultural opportunities, and census information as available at both the state and federal levels, including assistance in determining eligibility for the Indian Child Welfare Act. We removed that entire section because the commission is not vetted to do any of those services. Determine eligibility for the Indian Child Welfare Act is actually deemed by federal law and is deemed to federal and state tribes. New Hampshire doesn't have any control over that law. Then we actually removed 3, which is the big question of the day, the Indian Arts and Crafts Act. The reason why that was moved is, one, it's federal law. New Hampshire has no control over that. The feds endorse, not endorse, but enforce that law. And the other issue with it is actually in another section, which I'll get to. So here is my mistake. E should have been read, and you'll follow in the bill. That should have been read and crossed out, so I apologize for that. And once again, that's addressing the Arts and Crafts Act. The most of it is just, we changed, because it was 7 members, we changed it to majority of the commission members, and that all meeting notices and minutes will be put on the website. It's just wording changes. Once again, correcting of the capitalization of the Natural and Cultural Resource website. For the annual reports, we added the minority leader of the House and the minority leader of the Senate. We didn't understand why they were excluded. And then in section 11, we removed the line where it says, the authority to grant state tribal status or recognition under section 104 of the Indian Arts and Crafts Act of 1990 is reserved solely to the New Hampshire General Court. That's actually not true. So Congress has the right to grant federal tribal status, and if they do that, then they would then be eligible under the Arts and Crafts Act. New Hampshire would have no control over that. So this is once again a piece of that New Hampshire has no control over. And so that pretty much encompasses the entire bill with the changes. I do have a copy of support for the bill from our tribe. We were the tribe that helped put this bill into work when it was done back in 2010. We also have a copy of our petition for federal recognition, which seems to be ignored by some of the senators here, not at this table, but in the room. And if anyone has any questions as to my qualifications, here is a copy of my biography, so you can see my expertise within the field. And does anyone have any, well, does Paul have anything he wants to add?
We are a matriarchal society, and she is one of our primary speakers for our particular community. But I would like to highlight one thing. The Federal Arts and Crafts Act is actually a commerce act. People try to make this into a cultural act, and it was really to protect the tribes along the Mexican border, which were being inundated with cheap knockoff silver and blankets and things like that. And when it was established, it was protect those tribes that were known for their particular arts and crafts. It's expanded greatly exponentially across the country and how that interpretive law was made. But it still is for federal tribes. States can step in and recognize tribes to protect them under arts and crafts, but it's very specific. So when Vermont did what they did, those people that are there, whether they're living in Vermont or living in New Hampshire, they're still protected under the statute that created them in Vermont. So replicating that in New Hampshire has no bearing on those tribal groups from Vermont. They already have that status established, and they have been selling the arts and crafts as Vermont tribes. The borders are undefined when you get into the arts and crafts. In other words, if I was a Lakota selling something here or a Navajo selling blankets, I was making them, I still have the right to sell them in New Hampshire as made by Navajo, if you get how I'm addressing this. So if you're making a canoe and you're in Vermont or you live in New Hampshire, you're still allowed to because you're a state recognized tribe. So this is redundant and it has no place in here because the original intent when you see it in section 11 was to actually recognize that. And the whole point is it's a slippery slope. We are not in the business of recognizing individuals just for the Arts and Crafts Act.
Paul, just for clarification, are you referring to the Senator Waters amendment as being redundant?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to
So
understand.
we really think that because it was so well vetted and a lot of effort was put into this, and it went through a lot of iterations through the commission, addressed with Ben Wilson, the state SHPO, the department in charge of the commission. A lot of effort was made to make sure everything was fair, equitable, and above the board as far as law and statutes. Most of the problem we had is a lot of things under section, various sections of U.S. Title 25 are really reserved for federal tribes and have no place in any of our state government activities. So with that being said, we'd strongly encourage to go with the original wording of the bill as it was submitted by Representative Schmidt and just go with it as it is. I don't think putting that back in is going to have any bearing. And these issues can be brought up at the commission as well. It's not like we're a dead commission. If there was a strong interest in pursuing this later on, this could be addressed directly through the commission. And by the way, I am not on the commission now. I was one of the founding members, and I'm a tribal leader, and I have been a tribal leader since 1990. So I've been around quite a bit through, state government dealing with indigenous issues. I'm not a neophyte. I've been practicing Title 25 law, and I've made some strong connections with Franklin Pierce Law, of UNH's, law school. And we've partnered now with a federal judge that's now in residence here in New Hampshire working on indigenous issues. So
This was becoming such a problem. That's the extent we went to protect the state.
So you feel if we pass the original bill as it is, any of the concerns that Senator Waters was trying to take care of in the amendment could be addressed at the council, because this would give you the ability to meet easier because of the reduced quorum?
Right.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you.
The federal law is already in place, but this will ultimately make it so the commission can meet. I am no longer a member of the commission. I rotated off. I served my 6 years and left as vice chair. And so, yeah, that's why I'm speaking here, but I can't speak for the commission because I'm no longer on the commission.
Got it. Questions from the committee? All right. Thank you both for coming
Okay,
in.
thank you.
Appreciate your testimony.
Thank you very much.
That's the last person I have signed up. Anybody else want to speak on House Bill 1474? All right, seeing none, we'll close the hearing. Rep. Oregon is here, so we will open up the hearing on House Bill 1075. Morning, welcome to EDNA.
Welcome. This may be a little bit more, I wish, I'm in a somewhat awkward position because I signed in favor of the bill and I'm the prime sponsor, the only sponsor, but actually I'm not in support of the amendment, notwithstanding the fact that it passed on consent. I support, I guess, one thing. Didn't participate as much in the process. I could have, because I did death in the family back at the same time the hearings were. And of course, it was the House EDNA committee's bill anyways, so they can do anything they want to it. And they worked, I think, pretty hard on it. I'm thankful for the fact that they worked hard. And the rep who wrote the amendment is Representative Gould, who's sitting there. I'll leave it to her to explain what the rationale behind that version of it was. But basically, both versions of the bill were trying to get rid of the twice yearly changeover in the clocks from standard to daylight savings time. And I think, even though that's deeply embedded in like everything that we do as a society, it's kind of a nonsensical thing to do, and it causes a lot of disruption, health issues, accidents, just general confusion every time we do it in March and November. And obviously, the whole idea of somehow you can like reschedule when the sun rises and sets is kind of silly. We can't do much about the sun. My first impression when I saw the bill is amended that it would mandate year-round daylight saving time rather than year-round standard time. So I was subsequently assured that the bill wouldn't do that, but but looking into some more, I think my first impression was correct, that it would lead to year-round daylight saving time here in the U.S., which means, and actually year-round daylight time is currently illegal in the U.S., but there is a perennial bill. They have perennial in the Congress. They have them just like we have here in Concord. They have them in Washington, D.C., and there's something called the Sunshine Protection Act, which Senator Marco Rubio from Florida, who we remember here in New Hampshire because he ran for president, and another Congressman Vern Buchanan, they've been doing it every year, and it hasn't gotten very far, so it's not in effect, but the amendment does refer to 15 U.S.C. Section 260A, which I guess could theoretically mandate year-light daily savings time in the U.S. And so why that's a bad idea is basically because we're pretty near the center of the theoretical center of the eastern time zone. If those of you who, which is 5 hours behind Greenwich Mean Time or Universal Coordinated Time, depending what you want to call it. And there's like a widespread belief that our state, quote unquote, should be on Atlantic time, and there's perennial bills here in Concord to that effect. But actually, we're the only place in New England that, quote unquote, should be on standard time, Atlantic time, is just a little corner of Maine. So that's like a couple hundred miles east of here. If time zones don't follow the theoretical boundaries, but our time zone, Eastern time zone, it's the center of it is the 75th meridian west, which goes right through Philadelphia, and then it's 7.5 degrees of longitude east and west of there. So the eastern extent of that is around Machias, Maine. The western extent of that goes through either Detroit or Columbus, Ohio, which are on the same longitude. So that's so we're well within that boundary. Okay, yeah. So the reason why standard time is better, in my opinion, and there's a gentleman here who will give a much more detailed explanation. One is it's one of the main thing is it throws our circadian rhythms off. So like we really should have we need to have the sun coming up in the morning. It's good to have our clock time near the solar noon. The solar noon here in Concord would be about 15 minutes before 12 o'clock noon Eastern Standard Time, which is 1 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. So it's good to have that as close as possible. And also during the winter, I mean, there isn't much sunlight to go around, but if we had daylight time all winter, and we tried this about 50 years ago and it didn't work, the sun would be getting up around 8. I think it would be getting up after 8 a.m. for about a large portion of the late fall and early winter, and that would cause lots of traffic accidents. Kids would be waiting at bus stops in the dark. People would have a hard time waking up. So, even though there's only so much sunlight to go around, it's a good idea to have some of it in the morning when people are trying to get up and get to work and they don't have many artificial lights on. So it's better to have that in the morning rather than have it all like in the afternoon after work. And in the winter, even if we had daylight time, the sun would still go down pretty early in the afternoon anyway. That's kind of not something we can do much about, given we only have about 8.5 hours of sunlight in the winter. So, and anyway, the other thing, just to back, so what I'm asking the committee to consider is just going back to the original bill, which I guess means you'd have to have an amendment that says somebody would have to introduce an amendment, and I certainly will help you with that. And I've included a copy of the original bill, which of course would also be in the bill docket anyway, which the original bill, it's based on a model bill by the Coalition for Permanent Standard Time. Yes, there is a standard time lobby, and there's a supporter of it waiting to speak to you, actually. And they had bills for actually 48 of the 50 states. They don't have them for Arizona or Hawaii because they don't have daylight time in those two states. But and when you have a small state like ours, it's all in one time zone. The basic idea is they basically say that the time year-round shall be, in our case, Eastern Standard Time. That's the time officially defined as the astronomical time of the 75th degree of longitude, which, as I explained, goes right through Philadelphia. And then it would cross out a bunch of language that says how, when and how we switch to daylight time. And that's actually near and dear. I actually introduced a bill that established that language in it because our state law definition differed from the federal definition. And then would probably caused a certain amount of confusion is that the bill also like ties it to neighboring states, because it's not a good idea, especially with. So I said this is contingent on similar laws being passed in Massachusetts and Maine, and Maine apparently passed a law that Maine apparently has passed a law about that would have year-round daylight savings time. Massachusetts hasn't taken action one way or another, although it's being considered down in Boston and probably just about every other state capital. And so that's I tied it to Maine and Massachusetts. Actually, the model bill also included Vermont, but for some reason I thought that would be simpler just to have those two states, and perhaps it would have been better if I had Vermont. And then the model bills for every state have their own neighboring states. So like the Massachusetts bill is contingent on, see if I have the exact list here, Connecticut, New Hampshire, New York, Rhode Island, and Vermont. And if you went down to New York, there's a big contingent on a bunch of other states and so forth and so on. So basically, every state in the Eastern time, nothing would happen until at least all, or at least almost all of the states in the East Coast followed suit, which I think is something that may happen at some point. So this is so that's basically I'm asking you to go back to the original bill as originated, because I think having daylight savings time year-round is problematic, although it does, either version of the bill does eliminate one big problem, which is just the confusing, disruptive, and just totally absurd twice yearly clock change, so we don't have to spring forward and fall back. And
So Representative, if we stayed on standard time,
yes, that's what
that would mean my roosters would be crowing about 3:30 in the morning.
Well, roosters are going to do what they're going to do, so like we've even less control over them than the sun. But that's why I don't have any. Some of my neighbors do have urban chickens, and I sometimes hear them crowing, but it's not my thing in particular.
There you go.
But
Do we have any questions for the representative?
no.
All right, thank you for
Thank
your
you. Good,
testimony.
and good luck with the chickens.
Thank you. Rep Fellows.
Good morning. I'm Representative Sally Fellows. I represent Plymouth, Ashland, and Holderness. And my primary concern, you're getting written testimony, but I have a few additional things to tell you about. And I've also included a chart of the time zones on the back of your handouts, so you can just get some perspective on what happens. We know that, I think we know, that the federal government is the only one who can put us in the Atlantic time zone. We're prohibited, and the bill is stated in such a way that that's the only way that it would happen. But this gives you, and of course, their perspective would have to be for not just New Hampshire, for all the states that would be impacted by this. So you can look at the chart on the time zone chart and just think about like where would they consider setting that boundary. And it's this whole concept of making this switch started with Florida, and at least 15 years ago. And I think that what I read, I remember it from back then. I remember that they were talking about wanting to get more time for golf in the afternoon in the winter. So, but if you look up, if we put some of the states that are on the Atlantic coast, if they were moved into the Atlantic time zone, we're going to disconnect from the neighboring states to them. And I think that chart would start to look pretty unreasonable. Does the United States want 5 time zones instead of 4, and all those kinds of issues? But I'm going to stick to basically 2 issues. My biggest concern have to do with the students, and the fact that if we were to enact this bill as amended by the students would be waiting for the bus stop at 2 2 hours before sunup during the middle of the winter. And that clearly would be dangerous. In rural areas where there are no sidewalks, they'd be standing in the road waiting for the bus when there's snow around. So that is definitely a safety issue. And I think that maybe to a lesser extent, but I think it's also a safety issue for morning commuters, because the heaviest commute time from what I've experienced is between 7 and 8 in the morning. And during November, during December and January, that 7 to 8 hour commute would be totally in the dark. And for November and February, it would be partially in the dark. And in the middle of the winter, when we have a snowstorm, the plows are going to be out trying to clear up the road, and adding darkness to that just will make that even a more treacherous commute. So another aspect of how this will impact students is that we all know that high school students have a hard time getting up early in the morning, and that's due to hormonal changes that occurred during their teen years. And if we move this time zone so that it's dark and the sun doesn't come up until 8 o'clock in the morning, that's just going to make it harder for those kids to get up and get out of bed and get to school. So I'm asking you, should you think that you might want to pass this bill, please address the issue of what to do about the students going to school. Do you want to make some kind of requirement that the schools, shift their start time? I'm not suggesting that you do it. It's just like that seems to me an extremely important issue. So I think those are my major concerns. There are people who suggest that people have more heart attacks because we have a 1 hour change in the time. They lose 1 hour of sleep. I would just ask you to think of that, just use common sense to determine if 1 hour on one day is going to make any health concerns. I think a lot of times when I've heard on TV, including on ABC, Good Morning America, that when they talk about the time change, they conflate the science that says prolonged lack of sleep, which would be meaning getting, only 6 hours a night sleep for a prolonged period of time, definitely does impair people's ability, particularly in driving and things like that. But 1 hour on one night, is that reasonable to think that would make a difference? So that's the extent of my testimony. I'd be glad to answer any questions. This would be the third time I've testified on this bill.
Well, thank you. We appreciate your testimony. Questions from the committee? All right, seeing
Okay.
none, thank you. Rep. Gould?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee. Sherry Gould for the record from Merrimack 8, covering the towns of Warner, Bradford, and Henniker. So as I previously established, I am a farmer. My husband and I have a farm in Warner. And I was really excited when I saw this bill come in. And I've testified earlier to this committee, but to refresh all your memories, first time legislator, second year. So I'm still learning the ropes, right? I don't have the extensive experience many of you have had and other members of our committee of hearing this bill over and over and over and over again. However, I'm married to a logger and living on a farm. I was so excited because the time change is disruptive to farm life. You're right. It affects the animals. It affects my poor husband. Oh, every year I would hear about it for weeks in advance, and he'd cry and complain about it because logging, it just really affected his life. He's in tune with the seasons. And we have a Native American saying that that kind of laughs about this whole notion, like as if you get any more length to the blanket by taking some off the top and putting it on the bottom. So the debate over which time is proper is way beyond my interest level. What did interest me was hearing all of this debate, and we heard lengthy debate, that there must be a way to resolve this and to not hear it over and over and over again like Groundhog Day. So what I found was that the NCSL, the National Conference on State Legislatures, is tracking these bills all across the country. And that I was very excited with my esteemed colleague, Representative Horrigan's suggestion that we look at our neighboring states, and we certainly heard a lot of testimony about that. So looking at the bill in Maine, which is highlighted on the website tracking these bills, I saw that that Maine had a law and it tied the change to the Congress making the change. So that's where I thought it would make sense for New Hampshire to have a statute that did exactly that. And then Representative Horrigan was interested in standard time. The Maine law currently says daylight savings time, but this year Maine had a bill in to change daylight savings time in their law to standard time, blah, blah, blah. Like I said, that debate goes back and forth. To me, what mattered was that we get a law on the books. Standard time was what Representative Horrigan wanted, and it was what we currently seem to be leaning toward in New Hampshire. So that's what we went with. If and when Congress ever does make the change, New Hampshire certainly can talk then and have the lengthy debate about the research and which end of the blanket you want to put that time on and what makes the most sense. But for now, we could at least join, I have an extensive handout for you that in all the excitement about the previous bill, I forgot to print out, but I will email that to all of you. So it gives it gives this website, and I think it was 11 states are lit up on the map, including Maine. And so we just get on the map. Our Congress people will be watching this to see what are the states doing. And when there's a preponderance of states, I believe they'll finally take this up in Congress and pass it. But then I've been accused of having rose-colored glasses, so we'll see.
The eternal optimist. Well, thank you, Representative. Questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, thank you. Scott Spradling.
Good morning, Senators.
Good morning. Good
Nice to see all of you. My name is Scott Spradling. I am here representing the New Hampshire Association of Broadcasters in this conversation. We represent roughly 60 to 65 radio stations and radio station groups, as well as the state's 2 television stations, WMUR, which is owned by Hearst TV, and New Hampshire Public Television. It's a pleasure to be here and talking to you. I feel like this is a little bit of a version of Groundhog Day, only now we're waiting to pop up and see what time zone we're in. I wanted to express on behalf of the association some very real and economic impact concerns that we have about basically the entire conversation. We've been here before speaking as a universal group, essentially urging state lawmakers to be really, really careful about tinkering with what we're talking about. And I think the conversation you've already heard this morning is a really good microcosm of the problems that could be created with what feels like a ready, fire, aim approach to figuring out what the time zone bill should look like. Raise your hand if you're totally confused with Atlantic savings, daylight savings, Eastern savings, and everybody seems to be going in a completely different direction, which is really a bad idea when you're talking about time zones. Because the practical impact of this, which is something nobody seems to be talking about, is we could end up with states taking different positions, Congress lifting the barrier for making these changes, and the results of these conversations, which is a very real one because the New Hampshire bill you're looking at right now is daylight savings. Maine passed Eastern savings time. So we could end up with our 6 small states having different time zones within those areas that were decisions made by the states. From a radio and TV perspective, to bring it home, there are numerous radio station groups. Town Square Media, which is primarily on the eastern part of the state, headquartered in Rochester, Dover, but broadcasting into Maine and having Maine stations there. Great Eastern Radio on the opposite side of New Hampshire, which broadcasts largely in Lebanon and Claremont, but has Vermont radio TV stations. iHeartMedia, which is Rock 101, WGIR. They have national interests. They broadcast up and down the eastern seaboard. Saga Communications, which is primarily Keene and New Hampshire based, but broadcasts down into Massachusetts. We have radio station signals that cross state lines that have uniform programming that would be a hot mess of keeping track of the programming changes if we have these shifts that don't involve the entire region and arguably the entire eastern seaboard. This is really a conversation that needs to be pressured by states to Congress to act on behalf of all 50, not to empower states to make the kinds of decisions that states are trying to make right now. It just sets up a really complicated and backwards conversation. And I think it's important that we sort of remember our history here. Time zones were implemented in 1883. The Brooklyn Bridge opened in 1883, and the first electricity overhead lines were used in New Jersey in 1883. Safe to say, those lines came way before technology, broadcasting, and commerce turned our states into a far closer weaved patchwork quilt than what I think we had well over 100 years ago. So I think the idea of daisy chaining, which is sort of what it feels like we're trying to do here, will go if Massachusetts and Vermont may go, but what about Connecticut and Maine? And by connecting it that way, but going in completely different directions, it threatens the revenue streams. Advertisers rely on consistency in radio and television. It's what our systems are built on. New Hampshire has a much higher per capita radio listening audience than many other states because we're older than average. So those advertising dollars are not only essential to the radio stations that operate every day, but essential to the advertisers that are hoping people are awake. So especially with due difference to the things we can't change, like when the rooster crows and the sun starts to shine, I think there are ways in which we can do this that make a lot more sense than taking any approach like this with a bill like this. This really has to be congressional action for all 50 states. And my feeling is if, for those who think that this kind of a bill is a really good idea, there's a bridge in Brooklyn I think you might want to look at purchasing. And with that, I'll wrap up my testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Questions from
much.
the committee? We are happy to see that our legislature does represent the median age of New Hampshire.
Yeah, certainly. And thank you for listening.
All right, Michael Garahan. Good morning, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Mike Garahan. I am a volunteer with Save Standard Time. It's been a while since I visited your state, but I'm pleased to see that the granite curbs are still here. I agree with everything Representative Horgan said. We supported his original version of the bill to keep standard time year-round and oppose the House committee amendment to make it year-round daylight time. Daylight saving time is popular by association with summer, and I don't hold that against anyone, but people undervalue morning light unless they are deprived of it, as in the winter of 1974. History and science show that it matters which way we end daylight saving time changes, and standard time is the better way. So if I go too long, I would welcome a 1-minute warning. Anyway.
Would it be wrong to give you that now? I'm teasing, go ahead.
It's all right.
But feel free to just give us the highlights.
Sure. So on the history, daylight saving time was invented by a morning person who wished night people would get up earlier. And no, that was not Benjamin Franklin. He wrote a fun essay in 1784 about how much Parisians could save on candles if they got up earlier during the months from March to September. And he suggested several incentives, such as a tax on window shutters or cannon fire at sunrise. Changing the clocks is conspicuously absent from that essay. And in those days, the general agreement was local midday was 12 o'clock. That's been formalized as local mean time. Greenwich Mean Time is just a Greenwich-specific version of that. As Mr. Bradley mentioned, the railroads implemented time zones in 1883. The principle behind them is sound. When the train station in Concord adopted standard time that fall, that was only 14 minutes behind Concord mean time. Eastern Daylight Time is 46 minutes ahead. Another thing you might have heard is that daylight saving time is for farmers. They are also innocent of this. When the US adopted daylight saving time as a wartime measure in 1918, the farmers didn't like it and they organized to get it repealed in 1919. It was the Boston Chamber of Commerce and other similar organizations who kept it going. I looked into the history and learned that New Hampshire admirably held off using daylight saving time until 1937. In 1942, we brought daylight saving time back nationally as another wartime measure. It was called wartime, and it was year-round. By the time the war ended in 1945, people were pretty tired of it, and were happy to go back to standard time. In the post-war period, each state made their own daylight saving rules, and it got pretty chaotic. So Congress acted in 1966 with the Uniform Time Act saying, here's the national schedule. You may either follow it or keep standard time year-round. Those are the choices. In 1973, we had an oil embargo, and Congress responded to that by trying to make daylight saving time year-round again. The original plan was for 2 winters, but after the first winter, there was a lot of public concern about safety on winter mornings, and Congress said, we made a mistake. 1 winter like that was enough. Let's fall back again in October 74. It also didn't save that much energy. And today, with efficient lighting, like in this room, and desktop computers everywhere, and also air conditioners everywhere, it just doesn't save any energy at all, as far as we know. As to the science, in the last 20 years or so, people who study biological rhythm have established that while there are other drivers, the strongest driver of human circadian rhythm is the light and dark cycle. In the morning, the light stimulates cortisol, which promotes alertness. In the evening, the darkness stimulates melatonin, which promotes sleepiness. Daylight saving time, unfortunately, delays both. And people, on average, get 19 minutes less sleep throughout daylight saving season than they do during standard time season. There have been many studies of transition effects. These often make the news. But these only show us that the transition itself is bad. They don't really show us which mode is better. Studies which go out on that limb tend to be less rigorous about that. The studies that do shed light on which choice is better have been the ones that look at people's position within the time zone. And they've found that the longitudes farther west have higher rates of cancer and diabetes or fatal vehicle accidents. A good summary of this research is by Till Roneberg in an article titled Daylight Saving Time and Artificial Time Zones, a Battle Between Biological and Social Times. We also got some information from Russia's experiment with year-round daylight saving time in 2011 through 2014. There's a researcher named Porosenkov who found that adolescent mental health fared better under year-round standard time than it did under either seasonal or year-round daylight time. So to get to our objections to the present bill, it cites US 15th US Code 260A, but does not comply with it and has no effect without an act of Congress. The Sunshine Protection Act, which the US Senate passed in 2022 and woke up the sleep doctors, had to start over when the new Congress was seated in 2023. And if it passed, the effect would probably be similar to 1974. the bandwagon of states passing laws for year-round daylight time has slowed down quite a bit since then. Only 2 states have passed bills in both chambers in the past 3 years. And in the Northwest, some states this year got together informally to work together to pass year-round standard time because they were tired of waiting for Congress to act. Oregon and Ohio got a bill passed in one chamber, but not the other. I'm sorry, Oregon and Idaho. So if the House committee amendment passes for this bill, New Hampshire residents will either wonder why they're still changing clocks, or they will complain about winter morning darkness when they experience it. Standard time has the advantages that states can actually do it under US law, and that doctors recommend it. The American Academy of Sleep Medicine has led the way on this, and the American Medical Association backs them up. It doesn't make schools scramble to maintain their present level of safety. I looked and saw that the high school in Concord starts at 7:45 a.m. And if we had daylight saving time in the winter, the sun would rise later than that for nearly 3 months. So I would echo Representative Horrigan's position that the original bill we support, but the one before you right now, as amended by the House committee, we would oppose. I thank you for listening.
Well, thank you. That was very informational. Questions from the committee? All right, seeing none. All right, I don't have anybody else to testify on House Bill 1075, so we'll close the hearing. And I see Rep. Prue is here, so we will open up the hearing on House Bill 1079. Good to see you.
Good morning, everyone. Representative Mark Prue, Hillsborough 15. I am also the chairman of the Granite State Critical Incident Stress Management Team and have been doing that for over 35 years. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to have Officer Benton
Sure, come on up.
join me because he helped me write this.
Absolutely.
And I think the two of us can kind of tell you what's going on. So I started this bill to expand the people that we cover, right? Usually we're just police, fire, and EMS. But over time, hospitals, EDs have reached out to us to assist them, and we have. So I wanted to get them covered. And at the same time, we figured we'd make the definitions a little more clearer than they used to be, and also firm up our confidentiality, right? Because that's what drives us, is that when they come, first responders who are having issues come speak to us, they know that what they say stays with us, and make it really hard for it to be found out. Like I said, I've been doing this for over 35 years, and I will say for the first 15 to 20, it was very hard to get police officers to come because they were always afraid that if they said something in that debriefing, some lawyer would be throwing a subpoena out to try and get that information. So officers were suffering because they wouldn't come. Once we got the initial confidentiality, it's like the floodgates opened, right? And they came, and they were getting the help that they needed. So we just want to make sure that it stays in place and it's even more firm, so they still feel even more comfortable. And the same thing for fire and EMS, right? I know in the beginning nobody wanted to come and talk because they were afraid that it might get used, sent to the chief, and something would come around and you wouldn't get a promotion or something like that. So that's what this is all about, just to make it safer for them and more efficient and to cover more people. Anything else you'd like to add?
Sure, just please introduce yourself when you do.
Thank you. My name is Justin Breton, Breton. I am the Mental Health and Wellness Coordinator at the Manchester Police Department. I also represent the New Hampshire Police Association, and I am the coordinator along with Dr. and Chief David Goldstein of the Franklin Police Department for our Southern New Hampshire Critical Incident Stress Management Team. Thank you all for having us this morning at this very important piece of legislation. I find it interesting. Dr. Goldstein couldn't join us today. I find myself in a role of a bit of a historian for you folks this morning, which I find is rather interesting, as I've been in the field a lot less time than my colleagues and mentors that sit beside me. This bill originated in 2013 in the Senate. Historically, throughout its tenure, it has received bipartisan support. It is absolutely a tool that has helped the law enforcement community break down the stigma and barriers that exist around accessing culturally competent community mental health support services. Some of our esteemed colleagues from the Fraternal Order of Police actually released some data in 2001 and 2023 that I think is important for the committee to hear. 90% of the participants that participated in that survey articulated the concern that stigma was the main barrier for law enforcement professionals to access help. Over 79% of those participants articulated that they themselves had already experienced numerous critical incidents throughout their career. 90% of the participants also reported that the lack of their profession's knowledge and acceptance around receiving help as being one of the main barriers of accessing that support. 73% of participants in both 2001 and 2003 articulate that peer support is the #1 most effective tool at reducing that stigma and building the bridges to the appropriate supports that we need to be able to make it through this profession. One of our biggest missions is to prevent suicide amongst all first responder populations. The suicide numbers in the law enforcement community over the last few years have outnumbered those that are being killed by violent crimes. We are effectively killing ourselves more than we are being killed by criminals. And that is something that we're all working very, very, very hard to eliminate. New Hampshire is not untouched by that statistic. Since 2018, we've lost almost 12 law enforcement officers to suicide. So this is something that impacts us right here at home. The legislation that, as Representative Prue articulated, is really to clarify some of the parameters in which we work in, which I think is very important, especially to our membership and also the law enforcement chiefs in New Hampshire. It's really important that we know how we can safely work and how we can safely support our fellow first responders. And a lot of the amendments that you see help clarify that. We had some very productive work sessions in the House committee. The representative that helped us be successful is actually here today, and we're very grateful for that support that we've received so far. We obviously wanted to make ourselves available for any and all questions from the committee, but we greatly appreciate your attention to this matter.
Excuse me. Thank you for your testimony. I guess you have in the last section of the bill about the things that will not be deemed confidential. You talk a lot about suicide and suicide prevention. Maybe you could just, for the benefit of the committee, if someone comes to you with these and you, excuse me, and you feel that it meets that level, sort of what would happen? What would be the protocols, or how would someone be guided from there forward?
Absolutely. So the genuine hope is that as we're changing the culture and as we're changing the way we handle these situations in our community, if administration is made aware of those decisions, our peer support team is made aware of that, so we can effectively help our employees navigate that situation. We have developed a network across the state of vetted, culturally competent licensed mental health clinicians that our teams rely on for clinical consultation, and all of those clinicians make themselves available to help us assess and deem if our employees are safe. If it's a situation where they are not safe, the statute requires us to make sure that we get our employees the help that they need, the same as any other civilian or citizen of the state of New Hampshire. We're immediately taking action. We're not leaving their side. We're getting them the emergency assessment that they need, whether it's through one of our vetted clinicians, the state's mobile crisis divisions that are all around that have been established as of last year, and or facilitating getting that employee to an emergency room of their choosing to start that evaluation process. Once deemed that they're either safe or need further care, we've also established a network of culturally competent providers that we can refer these employees to that are law enforcement, first responder specific programs where the participants of those programs are only first responders. They're receiving treatment with their peers, with the individuals that understand the stressors that they're exposed to every day. And it's one of the most effective ways that we've been able to mitigate, to reduce the numbers of suicide and first responders experiencing trauma.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Senator Waltz-Shiller, did you have a question?
I did. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question.
Yes, ma'am.
I have, Representative Prue and I have worked on trauma-informed care for first responders in the past. I am fully supportive of that, and I have two questions. In the text of the bill itself, first question, on the back page, page 3, line 34, with reference to line 27, which line 27 reads, the communication is an explicit threat of imminent serious physical bodily harm or death to another individual or individuals. And then 3, 4, and 5 kind of hone in what that means. And we know we have data to support that when there is stress, particularly in law enforcement, the recipients of that stress that is not exorcised in a trauma-informed way are often spouses and partners. So does this accurately or effectively give space for those people to receive help in the same way that we've outlined children and elderly and vulnerable adults? So how will we address that?
So just to clarify, the outline on the back, that is specifically to the bill itself only pertains to a confidentiality privilege between first responders.
Right.
I can say that all of our peer support teams are effectively working to provide the appropriate support services for family members and for spouses. However, this bill does not provide a protection for I'll use a law enforcement officer as an example because that's what I am. It does not provide me the confidentiality protection to speak with a spouse and have that communication be protected or privileged by the statute.
That's not what I meant.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I was not clear. So what's concerning is that in line 5, part 5, the communication, confidential communication indicates the existence of past or present acts constituting an intentional commission of a crime. So what we know is that when there is stress in the home related to law enforcement work or first responder work or firefighter work, being on a 911 answer board, we want to provide confidential support services to those people. If they subsequently in the confines of that communication disclose that there is the abuse of a child involved in their trauma processing or an elderly adult, that breaks confidentiality. But if they then talk about abusing a partner, that's a crime.
Yes, ma'am.
How's the support in getting that, breaking that stigma of keeping it behind closed doors?
Yeah. That feel the communication is explicit threat of imminent serious physical bodily harm or death to another individual or individuals. That's pretty broad. So
Yeah.
If they say that I'm going to go home and beat my wife because I'm stressed, we're going to report that.
Yeah. Yeah. Or it would most likely be things got out of hand and
Yeah.
it's minimized in the moment. I think it's not necessarily for me, but for that there's an acknowledgement on your part that that's actually a crime that needs addressing outside the confines of confidential communication. And I apologize, I have been summoned back across the street, so I'll be back. Thank you, and thank you for your answers. I'm so sorry, I have to.
And if I may add to that,
Feel-
just
feel
from
free
a
if you'd like.
clarification
Yes.
from a law enforcement perspective, and hopefully this is being recorded, so
It
the
is.
senator can review this later. Obviously, it's a very important question that needs to be addressed. As a law, nothing in this statute is meant to override or oversee any or minimize any law enforcement role that any of us are sworn to uphold and protect. The genuine intention of those clarifications are to make sure that everybody knows that specifically the law enforcement community is not looking to hide behind a veil of protection, that any and all crimes that we receive information of as a law enforcement officer will be reported and will be documented as required by law. There is nothing about this statute that is meant to minimize or mitigate that very important responsibility in protecting victims and keeping the citizens of New Hampshire safe.
Thank you. Further questions? Down to you and me. All right. Thank you both. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
you.
Perfect. Then I have to be in exec session at 11.
Rep. Simon, did you want to say anything while you're here? You didn't check speaking, but
I didn't check speaking. I was going to wait and see if I was needed. If you don't mind, I'd like to
please.
add a few more things. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Matthew Simon, Grafton District 1, towns of Littleton, Lisbon, Lyman, Bath, Sugar Hill, and Monroe. As the speakers before me mentioned, we did take a deep dive into this in our subcommittee. It does have the unanimous support of the House ED&A committee and passed overwhelmingly in the House as well. I just wanted to walk you through some of the changes that occurred in this bill so that you have a full breadth of what actually was adjusted. So if you look at the top of page 2, line 1, we define emergency response public safety worker. That term was referred to in statute. It's referred to in this bill, but it wasn't defined anywhere. So we added that definition so we knew exactly what we were talking about and who this applied to. On line 7, hospital emergency department personnel, one of the main purposes of the bill was to extend this peer-to-peer support to people who are in emergency room situations. Once again, these people have personal knowledge of the experience of going through this kind of trauma and are better equipped, in our opinion, to help people who are going through similar trauma rather than a counselor who maybe doesn't have that kind of experience and is sometimes overwhelmed by the level of trauma that is being communicated to them. We heard testimony about that as well. So that piece got put in there. If you go down to line 23, when it comes to the standards that they have to follow for these peer-to-peer support groups, we added that they have to file with the Commissioner of Safety, and also the Commissioner has to sign off on the training standards. That just gave us some level of governmental oversight into the process so that they weren't out there completely on their own. They were accountable to somebody. Page 3. We added disclosed or on line 2, once again, bringing the person who is receiving the counseling, that confidentiality that they were looking for. So it's not just the obtained, but the people who are actually disclosing that information. We wanted to make sure that was in there. And the other thing that the bill does that wasn't mentioned that I just wanted to bring up is it allows for retired individuals to continue to access this service. Before, if this bill does not pass presently, you only can be a part of this peer-to-peer support if you're still in active duty. But of course, those people sometimes are still processing the trauma, and this would allow them as retired people to both be a part of the support services and also to receive the services. So just wanted to make sure that you had the full breadth on what the bill accomplishes, because most of the conversation was just on that last part, which is just expanding the definitions that are already in statute and clarifying exactly what we mean by them. So that's my testimony, and I'm happy to answer any questions I can.
Thank you. Any questions? All right.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ben Bradley, did you want to speak or did you just sign in? I don't see Ben. I don't. All right. Looks like that's all we have. So with that, I'm going to close the hearing on House Bill 1079. We're going to take about a 5-minute recess and then we'll open the next bill. All right, we will open the hearing on House Bill 1352, and I will recognize Representative Gould to introduce the bill. Good morning and welcome to Senate, EDNA.
Something new this year over here. Good morning. For the record, Representative Jeff Goley, representing Hillsborough District 21, Manchester Ward 1. Here today to introduce House Bill 1352, relative to firefighter personnel protective equipment. This was brought forward at a request of professional firefighters in New Hampshire in regards to, as we know, PFAS in this day and age has been shown to be a carcinogen and not good for individuals. And there's a number of protective equipment that firefighters wear that entail having these in the station wear and in the turnout gear that they wear. This would go forward in prohibiting that, and I'll be brief because I have the Representative Simon, who chaired the subcommittee, did a good job on putting the rest of this together, as well as professional firefighters as to why they were asking for this. But I just wanted to go through, just briefly and let you know that the fire chiefs are here in support of it. I spoke with the folks with the Municipal Association, and they've taken no position on this, so they don't have any issues with this as it is written. But there was only one section that we were looking at on page 2. Line 19, it names specific chemicals. And there was some discussion among some folks in the chemical industry and those that manufacture clothing on naming those specific chemicals into the statute. And my understanding is the folks behind me will have come to an agreement with the professional firefighters and the chemical manufacturers or the clothing manufacturers and an amendment to this language that they both have agreed upon. So they'll have that that they'll propose to you that I think would clarify that. Other than that, I think I can let the folks behind me, Representative Simon, who chaired the subcommittee, and professional firefighters and the chiefs are here to support.
All right.
Be
thank
happy
you.
to answer any questions.
Any questions? All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Rep Simon, do you want to speak on this? Okay. That's okay.
Representative Matt Simon Grafton, District 1. So this bill came before us. We did a lot of work on it in subcommittee. A few things that it does, it defines station wear as opposed to turnout gear. So that's the gear that they're wearing when they're, not in dangerous situations, T-shirts, pants, things of that nature. Over time, these articles of clothing have also been treated with PFAS, just kind of thought of as an extra layer of protection. We didn't know what it was doing at the time. And so defining that and then basically limiting and eventually getting rid of the use of it. There's no added protection, really. They don't have to be wearing this underneath their turnout gear for safety purposes. Most of the stuff can just be regular cotton and things of that nature. And so the bill, if you look on the second page, page 2, and then really the main purpose of the bill at the bottom is that beginning January 1st, 2025, fire departments shall not provide as an option the purchasing of fire station wear that contains PFAS. And then on July 1st of 2025, people will also be prohibited from wearing it. The 6-month gap there is to allow time. Firefighters get allocated funds for clothing. So we wanted to make sure that they had time once they were allocated their funds to go out and purchase the clothing before they were required to switch over to non-PFAS related station wear. That was really the main purpose of the bill. Just one other note on it, at the bottom of page 1, basically a notice needs to be put in the personnel files as to whether or not the station wear does or does not have PFAS chemicals in it. And also a copy of the same needs to be provided directly to the employee, so the employee knows what's in the clothing that they're wearing. The firefighters know what's in the clothing that they're wearing. So it's just a protective measure. As we learn more about, these fire retardant agents, it's a protective measure to make sure that we're keeping our firefighters safe. So I'll sum up my testimony with that, and happy to answer any questions I can.
So do you have amended language you want us to consider?
I believe they do.
They do, okay.
Yes, no. So I actually said I was going to kill it in the committee of conference because we obviously did perfect work, and them wanting to change it now is unacceptable. But no, the amendment sounds reasonable to me. But they have the actual language on it. So
It's always good as a member of the general court when we have these aha moments and realize we don't do perfect.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Any
Thank you very much.
questions?
Okay.
Senator Gendro.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question, Representative. So we know PFAS is dangerous, but it also is a fire retardant. Is that correct?
Correct.
So, and I probably missed it in the testimony or in the bill. Research has already been done then to find a new retardant that is safe, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So,
All right.
so when those become available, and the bill also talks about this as well, when those become available, they'll need to switch over the turnout gear as well. We'll be working towards that. But right now, we don't have an adequate substitution for those chemicals in the turnout gear. So when you're going into a fire, these are still the best things to wear. When you're in imminent danger, these are still the best things to wear. But there's no reason for the station wear to be that way. This is the stuff that they're doing workouts in. This is the stuff when they're waiting on call at the fire department. They're wearing this gear. It's a uniform, but it's not. It doesn't need to be fire protective to increase their safety. There are certain tasks that they can do out in the community. There's where fire isn't a risk, and of course the police chiefs are going to have levity to make these calls on safety concerns. But we don't want them wearing their PFAS-related jacket out in public when they're doing traffic or something like that, where there's really no need for them to be wearing that and exposing themselves to those chemicals. So yes, they are still necessary as a fire retardant in imminent danger. This just says when they're not in those situations, that should be limited. Exposure should be limited.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thanks for your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Adam, are you introducing the amendment or is John? Not you. John, all right, come on up, John. Take copies, okay.
Good morning, Senator Pearl and the honorable members of the committee. For the record, my name is John McAllister, and I'm a 25-year member of the National Fire Department and currently serve as the Secretary Treasurer of the Professional Firefighters of New Hampshire. That amendment had been emailed to you earlier this week, but we did just have that copy, a hard copy to send to you guys as well. So just moving forward. And basically, the professional firefighters of New Hampshire are in favor of the amendment. The amendment basically takes away the 5 chemicals that were named in the original bill and replaces it with non-polymerized forms of PFAS. I apologize. As I said, I represent the professional firefighters of New Hampshire. We are in full support of this bill. This bill simply helps to reduce the risk of New Hampshire firefighters' exposure to PFAS chemicals, which are currently found on our fire protective gear, as well as some of the uniforms that we're wearing today. PFAS chemicals found in firefighter personal protective equipment pose a significant threat to the health and wellness of our firefighters. These persistent and toxic substances are known for their resistance to heat, water, and oil, and as it's integrated with the personal protective equipment. PFAS chemicals can leach into the skin, presenting serious health risks to our members. Studies have linked PFAS exposure to many adverse health risks to our members. Firefighters are already exposed to numerous hazards in their day-to-day operations and should not be subject to additional unnecessary exposure through our personal protective equipment. Regulating and minimizing the presence of PFAS in firefighting personal protective equipment is crucial to safeguarding the health and well-being of those on the front lines. Enacting this legislation and encouraging fire departments to give preference to safe alternatives when designed and manufactured demonstrates a commitment to prioritizing the safety and well-being of our firefighters. This committee and legislature has shown great interest in protecting those in the fire service. In 2018, the New Hampshire passed Senate Bill 541, which established prima facie presumptive language to cover firefighter occupational cancer. And just last year, Senate Bill 71 was signed into law, ensuring that Firefighters are covered from all cancers that they obtain from from their job. Until such time that a safe and economic alternative can be identified, it is imperative that departments also have in place a policy that limits unnecessary exposure to firefighter PPE as well as our station uniforms, with intentionally added non-organic fire-resistant chemicals. House Bill 1352 is a comprehensive and forward-thinking initiative that provides assurances to the firefighters of this state that their health and safety is non-negotiable. I urge the committee to consider the positive impacts of this legislation and the well-being of our firefighters. And on that note, one thing that I do want to bring to the attention is, and it kind of dawned on me last night when I was preparing for this testimony, every day the International Association of Firefighters send out an email. And in that email is a list of a name of a member of the International Association of Firefighters that has passed away from occupational cancer. 2 days ago, we received 4 emails, 4 separate emails of 4 different individuals that passed away from occupational cancer. The day before that, we received 2. Every day, we're receiving at least 1. This is a step in the right direction to hopefully alleviate that from further members. The International Association of Firefighters last year did a study, and in that study, they looked at the chemicals that are in the uniforms that we wear on a day-to-day basis, and a lot of that information is where we came up with this language to protect our members within the state. That's all I have for a testimony. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I hope you guys consider the support for Senate Bill 1352.
Well, thank you for your testimony, and certainly know we all appreciate what you and the members of your association do for us on a daily basis. Very much appreciated.
Thank you, Senator.
Questions?
Yeah, just
Senator General.
thank you. Thank you for taking my question.
Yes.
So other than the clothing, we know that the foam sometimes they use
Yep.
contains PFAS as well, correct?
Correct.
And other than that, is there anything else that would put them in danger? I mean, I can't really think, as silly as it sounds, even the fire hoses. I mean, for protection, would that contain PFAS? I mean, at some point would, hopefully, this chemical be completely eliminated.
Yeah, that is our hopes that PFAS chemicals are eliminated entirely out of anything that we use for either for protective equipment or equipment in general. I do not know of anything, any fire hoses or anything like that. As far as your question in regards to the foams, there was a law that was enacted in the state of New Hampshire a few years ago. I can't remember the exact date, but the process in that law was to start the process to eliminate any type of foam that was used in fire departments throughout the state of New Hampshire. And I do believe that is ongoing, and they are continuing to remove any of PFAS, any types of foam that contain PFAS in it has been removed from service and disposed of properly.
Okay, good, thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Adam?
Thank you, Senator. For the record, Adam Schmidt. I'm here today on behalf of the New Hampshire Association of Fire Chiefs. We're in full support of the legislation. We had some technical issues prior to the Senate, or excuse me, the House hearing, and they were all worked through in the House. The concerns the chiefs had were addressed, so we're fully in support of the bill. The amendment on the chemicals, I've been brought up to speed. I haven't heard any concerns on that yet. I'm assuming we'll be fine with that as well. I think the only thing we'd like to ensure that happens is, like John was just explaining, this is a well-established law. This is pretty familiar with a lot of the chiefs and departments throughout the state. At the same time this bill is being heard, 1649 is being heard in the Senate Energy Committee. I think it just would be important to have a cross-reference somewhere in that bill, not this one, that this statute would be the one that would govern PFAS and firefighting PPE, because I think it's a better approach. It's more comprehensive, and like John said, this law has been on the books for a while. So full support of this bill. We just want to make sure that there's some tweaking of perhaps 1649 to direct folks when they're concerned about PFAS and firefighting PPE, they look to this statute.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Anybody else that would like to testify? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on House Bill 1352. Down to you and me. I don't know that we should exec any or not. Probably not. I mean, we could get through these very quickly.
Very good, and I think we agree on a lot of them.
All right. Well, we're going to just take a 5-minute recess right now, just in case we do get some members back, and we'll see if we come back. All right, being 11:20 and our business is done for the day, we're going to close today's session of Senate ED&A. And thank you all for your participation. And again, thanks both of you for what you do.
Thank you.